Welcome, everyone, to the Retro Chat podcast. That was weird. I didn't take my mic off. That might be why you suddenly saw a little bit of confusion on my face if you're watching the show, because I didn't expect it not to do that. And if it's anything like Quiz Night Live, I would have done the first 10 minutes in complete and utter silence. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the Retro Chat podcast, where we're going to be talking all about the iconic wrestling pay-per-view called Survivor Series 1997, and it took place earlier this month on November the 9th in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. And it's iconic for one reason, and we're going to touch on that a little later on. But before we do that, let's talk a bit more about how you can get in contact with us right here at the Retro Chat podcast. And new layout, very similar to what we had before, but what you can see now is all of the social media details are on the bottom of the screen all the way through the show. Now, you can Facebook us, you can Instagram us, you can watch us on Twitch by looking for the Retro Chat podcast. Tweet us at Retro Chat Pod, or if you're not on the YouTube channel right now, head over to the Retro Chat Podcast UK and click on subscribe and follow. All of the shows that we do are released not only in audio format, but on video as well, with a pre-recorded release out on Twitch. So whatever means you're on, you are going to be able to witness the latest episode of the Retro Chat podcast. So one other thing to mention as well, I mentioned the audio stream, and you can listen to that for free on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Pandora, iHeart, any other major podcast provider. Please click subscribe or follow. And if you're on Apple, leave us a review, because your reviews really help us move up the rankings, get known, and be able to bring you the guests that you want on this show. Not always me yapping. Sometimes you want guests like Nick Aldis, like Jay Frankie, like Larry Kenny. We've already had some crackers. We got a few more in the pipeline, but we need more. So please leave us a review, 5-star review, leave us a comment, and we can bring you more. If you're listening on Spotify, you will notice that there are some new options for you. You can answer questions if I've set one in the narrative. You can answer polls, but you can also leave me a voicemail. Get in contact with me. Leave me a voicemail. Tell me what you think of the topic that we're talking about. Tell me about what you want coming up on the Retro Chat podcast. Let me know, and I will play them, as long as they're clean, on the show for you. So you truly have a voice right here on the Retro Chat podcast. Okay, so let's talk about what we're here to talk about today, and that is, of course, the 1997 Survivor Series. It was the 11th annual Survivor Series event, and it took place at the Moisson Centre in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Now, the tagline for this, and this is something they started doing from 96, which was the Deadly Games tournament, was Gang Rules. And this referred to the various wrestling stables that feuded with each other coming to the event. Now, in total, there were 7 matches on the card, mixed in with 4-on-4 elimination tags. You also had Stone Cold Steve Austin facing off against Owen Hart in a one-on-one for the Intercontinental Championship. This was, of course, the rematch from SummerSlam, which took place after Austin suffered the broken neck. You had Kane versus Mankind, and of course, you had the main event, and that's obviously what we're going to be talking about today. The World Wrestling Federation Championship was put on the line as the Hitman Bret Hart defended the strap against the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels in the final of the 3 matches that they had for the championship. They had previously headlined the 1992 Survivor Series and WrestleMania 12, and it was also the last time that the Hitman Bret Hart held a championship in the WWE until May of 2010, and it was one of the last times, in fact, it was the last time that you saw the Hitman on a World Wrestling Federation event or a WWE event up until mid-2000s, when he returned to Monday Night Raw and reunited with the Heartbreak Kid and put the rift to bed. The Survivor Series can be considered either the last pay-per-view before the Attitude Era, or it could be considered the first pay-per-view of the Attitude Era. Who knows? Huh? The attendance was 20,593 in attendance. The previous event to that was In Your House Bad Blood, and it was preceded by In Your House D-Generation X, which was the headline pay-per-view with Shawn Michaels defending the strap for the first time since winning it. So if you've never seen a Survivor Series before, what were you getting? Well, first of all, where have you been? Survivor Series was one of the most iconic pay-per-views of the World Wrestling Federation at the time. Unfortunately, in recent memory, it's kind of lost its status and its appeal, I think. Bad booking by the WWE, a lack of continuity in terms of what they were doing and what made it unique, which was the Survivor Series single elimination tag team matches. Because when it was launched back in 87, it was one of the big four. You know, you had WrestleMania, which you still have, the iconic WrestleMania event. You can't talk professional wrestling without talking of that. You then had the Royal Rumble, which was the 30-man over the top rope battle royal, which took place in January. Again, a staple of the calendar, and it still now has prevalence of being the beginning of the road to WrestleMania. You then had SummerSlam, the summertime spectacular, the SummerSlam party, don't know where that came from, in July and August. And it was just one of the big ones. And yeah, I don't know, it just seems to have lost its appeal. I think that kicked off in 96 with Deadly Games, where there weren't any, from what I can remember, elimination tag matches. It was the championship tournament in which The Rock won the World Wrestling Federation title for the first time. So the Survivor Series consisted of wrestling matches involving the performers from pre-existing feuds and storylines that played out on the flagship program Monday Night Raw. Wrestlers portrayed a hero or villain, we know that, and they followed a series of events that build tension. The storyline between the Hitman Bret Hart and the Heartbreak Kid began after Michaels became #1 contender for the World Wrestling Federation title by defeating The Undertaker in the first ever Hell in a Cell at Bad Blood in Your House. On the following night's episode of Raw, Michaels, alongside his friend Triple H, were blurting out insults to Vince by the announce table, and then Bret, alongside members of the Hart Foundation, appeared with Hart calling Michaels nothing more than a degenerate before challenging the game to a match later that night. Hart lost to Helmsley by countout after Michaels hit him with sweet chin music while he was blocking an attack by Chyna, Helmsley's bodyguard. And really, that was the beginning, if you will, of D-Generation X. So let's look at the results. Let's look at the cards. So we kicked the event off with the Godwins, and it was Henry O. Godwin, Phineas Godwin, and the New Age Outlaws. Oh, you didn't know? Billy Gunn and the Road Dogg Jesse James defeated the Headbangers, Marshall and Thrasher, and the New Blackjacks, which was Blackjack Bradshaw and Blackjack Wyndham, otherwise known as Barry Windham. That was a 4-on-4 elimination match. It ran for 15 minutes and 25 seconds. We then moved to our next one, which was the Truth Commission. So that was the Interrogator, otherwise known as Kurgan, the Jackal, Don Callis, if you watch AEW. That was who John Callis was portraying at the time. Recon and Sniper, they defeated the Disciples of Apocalypse. 8-Ball Chains, Crush, Crush, and Skull. You can tell I can't get my words out today. That was 9 minutes and 59 seconds. We then moved on to a match that really kind of took a lot of people by surprise, because it was Team Canada, which was members of the Hart Foundation, the British Bulldog, and Jim the Animal Neidhart, going up against Doug Furnas and Phil LaFon. They faced off against Team USA, which was Goldust, Mark Merrow, Steve Blackman, and Vader. That ran for 17 minutes and 5 seconds. Kane with Paul Bearer defeated Mankind, because we'd had this whole feud developing between the Big Red Machine and Mankind. Ken Shamrock, Ahmed Johnson, and the LOD, Animal and Hawk, defeated the Nation of Domination, Farouk, D'Lo Brown, Kama Mustafa, and a very young Rocky Maivia in 20 minutes and 28 seconds. Steve Austin defeated Owen Hart with the British Bulldog, Doug Furnas, Jim Neidhart, and Phil LaFon at ringside for the World Wrestling Federation Intercontinental Championship. And the Hitman, Bret Hart, was defeated by the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels, by submission. Now, one thing I need to point out is a correction on my part. It wasn't 1996 that was the tournament. It was 1998. The 1998 Deadly Games tournament where The Rock won the strap. So please just ignore me. So what happened after the event? So we've talked already this morning, or today, whenever you're listening to this, about the aftermath of the match, about how that match was run between the Hitman Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. We know that Bret the Hitman Hart had signed a long-term deal with the World Wrestling Federation. I think it was around 20 years that he'd signed. Now, at this point, WCW and the World Wrestling Federation are competing against each other. It's the Monday Night Wars. It's Raw versus Nitro. And at this point, WCW are kicking the backside of Vince and the World Wrestling Federation. This 83 weeks where they were destroying them in the ratings and becoming, in all essence, the number one promotion in the US. Vince contacted the Hitman and said that I can't afford you anymore. I can't keep you in your contract. Go and field offers from Eric Bischoff and WCW. So that is what the Hitman did. Bret signed with WCW and was going to be appearing on Nitro the following week. Vince, quite rightly, didn't want the Hitman to leave the World Wrestling Federation as the WWF champion. They'd already had a situation where Alundra Blaze, the former World Wrestling Federation women's champion, appeared on Nitro and dropped the women's belt in the bin live on commentary. And that caused huge embarrassment to Vince and the World Wrestling Federation. So the rumors are that he and Shawn came up with the screw job. And the screw job would be that the referee, Earl Hebner, would ring the bell when Shawn Michaels applied a submission move to Bret Hart. And Vince would order the ref to ring it without Hart submitting. Therefore, Shawn would become the World Wrestling Federation champion. So after the Survivor Series, Michaels began his third reign as champion. He entered a feud with Ken Shamrock over the championship, which culminated at DX in Your House, where Michaels retained the strap after Shamrock run by disqualification after being attacked by fellow DX members Triple H and Chyna. Michaels would go on to hold the title up until WrestleMania 14 in 1998, where he lost it to the Texas Rattlesnake, Stone Cold Steve Austin. And that was, of course, the changing moment, the pivotal moment where the battle between Raw and Nitro, between WWF and WCW, really changed, because Iron Mike Tyson coming in gave them their first win, and Austin was propelled to superstardom as being the icon that he was. After WrestleMania 14, Michaels disappeared for 4 years into a retirement due to suffering an injury against The Undertaker at the 1998 Royal Rumble in the casket match, where he hurt his back. Michaels wouldn't recover or wrestle again until 2002, where he faced off against Triple H at SummerSlam. After winning the IC strap, Austin entered into a feud with The Rock. The Rock stole the championship after a beatdown from the Nation on the 17th of November's episode of Raw. Austin retained the strap and regained the belt by defeating The Rock at DX in Your House, and Austin forfeited the title to The Rock the next night on Raw with the intention of going after the WWF Championship before hitting The Rock with the Stone Cold Stunner. Vince McMahon had a change of character as well because of screwing the Hitman from the championship marked the beginning of the Mr. McMahon character, the tyrannical CEO of the WWE. And by 1998, Vince would begin the biggest rivalry, many people say, in the history of professional wrestling by feuding with Stone Cold Steve Austin. And that would go for years, right up until 2001, where Austin rejoined McMahon and partnered up with him at WrestleMania X7 by the chair. The events of the Screwjob would repeat at the following year's Survivor Series, which we've talked about, albeit as part of a work when The Rock locked Mankind in the sharpshooter before Mr. McMahon ordered the referee to call for the bell, screwing Mankind and awarding the vacant WWF Championship to The Rock with his first run and the launch of the corporation and the corporate champion. So what was the reception of the event like? Well, Ken Patoja of 411 Mania gave the event a rating of 6, stating it was average. He said, shortly after the network launched, I watched the show and I disliked it. Looking at it now, it's pretty good. The Survivor Series matches, except for the DOA, are all relatively fun. It also gets the score bumped up a bit more due to the historical value. And the main event, while not classic, kind of has to be seen by any and every wrestling fan. And every wrestling fan has their own opinion about what happened that night. Every wrestling fan that I've ever spoken to whilst doing Ministry or the Squared Circle or the Total Wrestling Show all have their own opinion. Was it a work? Was it a story that gave birth to this whole conspiracy theory that's run for years and years and still being talked about today, even though Michaels and the Hitman buried the hatchet in 2010? Now, for the Hitman, Bret Hart, it was bittersweet because, as we said, he moved to WCW, where during his run, he became a 2-time WCW World Heavyweight Champion, a 4-time WCW United States Champion, and 1-time WCW World Tag Team Champion before retiring, unfortunately, in 2000 after suffering a severe concussion by Goldberg. And that was the end of the Hitman Bret Hart. Of course, in 1999, we also had the unfortunate passing of Owen Hart at WWF Over the Edge, and you can hear more about that on the archives when we did the Owen Hart show. So those few years for the Hitman were not pleasant. They were not fun, and there was a whole load of change and upset for him. And you can understand, I think, why Bret was just a bit bitter about everything, because the Hitman had put years, about over 20, 25 years in with the WWE, working his way up, becoming the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be, to coin a phrase. And quite rightly now is in the World Wrestling Federation Hall of Fame. It's an interesting pay-per-view. It's one that I went back and watched it when I decided I was going to be doing it again. I went back and watched it for the first time in wow, a long time. I hadn't seen it for ages. And I was a bit like the review from 411. You know, the classic matches were okay, but really you watch it for that match. You watch it for Bret versus Shawn. You could skip to the end and just have that, and you would enjoy the pay-per-view because of that, because you know it's coming. And I'd forgotten how brutal it was at the beginning, how they were battling for about, I think it was 6 minutes before the bell even rung. And at the end of the match, after Vince has ordered Earl Hebner to ring the bell and award the strap to Shawn Michaels, Michaels gets out of there. It's like a war zone. The crowd are going crazy. Bret is throwing monitors and camera equipment, spits at the face of Vince McMahon, and then does the iconic WCW to the crowd to say, I am going there. What happened backstage was as interesting, if not more interesting, than what happened on the pay-per-view. Because rumor has it that the Hitman Bret Hart stormed into the locker room of Vince and gave him a black eye. Vince would appear the following night on Monday Night Raw sporting this black eye, and it was the British Bulldog who pulled Bret away, otherwise more damage would have been done. Now, as the weeks progressed with the storyline, Bret was obviously in WCW. He was on Nitro each and every week. It was a different Bret Hart. Bret was broken, I think. He didn't recover from this. This really did impact Bret in how he performed and what he did going forward. But there was a moment where they teased the return of the Hitman. The music played, the crowd went nuts, and out came the midget, Bret the Hitman Hart. Was it distasteful? Yes, but you got to understand at the time, that's what Shawn Michaels was all about. The Heartbreak Kid was the big heel. He was the number one heel in the company. And why wouldn't you push it to get something that you want out of that? So where does the Survivor Series sit in the annals of wrestling history? Was it a good pay-per-view? It was okay. It wasn't amazing. But the infamy surrounding it is what really makes it stand the test of time. And it's got to be in the top 5, at least for that match, just to go back and watch the Hitman versus Shawn Michaels. In the coming months, in the coming weeks, we are going to be doing an episode about Bret versus Shawn. It's going to be the history of their feud. And hopefully we'll be bringing somebody on for that. In the archives, if you go back to From the Vault, you can listen to an interview that Lee and I did back in the day with the Hitman Bret Hart, where we talk about the Montreal Screwjob. And you can hear Bret's perspective from that in that interview available in the archives. We'll put a link to that in the narrative as well. But that's it for me. Thanks for joining me for this Survivor Series 1997 look back. In the next couple of weeks, in the next couple of shows, we're going to be looking at the 1990 Survivor Series, the birth of the gobbledygooker, but more than that, the arrival of the Phenom, the Undertaker, with Ted DiBiase. We'll be talking about that more. We got plenty more to come right here on the Retro Chat podcast. But until then, I thank you for joining me. My name is Andy Evans, and I will see you very soon, right here at the Retro Chat podcast. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.